Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to talk about the misconception among certain women that getting emotionally closer will lead to more sex. So within couples counselors say that this will happen, yet people stay in couples counseling for years and years. They learn all their I feel statements. They don't scream as much at each other, which is great, but, doesn't usually take multiple years to accomplish. And the intimacy never changes. So we will talk about when and why this is correct for certain women, but incorrect for many, many people that I end up seeing in my office. And before that, please do subscribe. The most recent subscriber episode was on marital coercion and what that is and isn't, and how to repair if that is in fact what happened. And then the next episode will also be subscriber only, but I'll have to decide what that is. And we have 130 other episodes, lots and lots and lots of listening for only $8.99 a month. Okay, so if you are a young preoccupied attachment woman, who are the majority of women, young women that come into couples counseling, so basically under 40, under 35, young women, young mothers in the young mother stage, there are more preoccupied attachment women than preoccupied attachment men. Most men, if they're insecurely attached, are avoidant. Most insecurely attached women are preoccupied. The reason this may surprise you is because obviously the men on the internet in relationship forums trying to seek relationship advice are solely the preoccupied attachment men. So if you are a preoccupied attachment man that came to me from DSO or some other relationship site or a Reddit, dead bedrooms, whatever, the men who post about relationships are definitionally preoccupied attachment men. Avoidant attachment men are spending their time doing their hobbies and their work. They're in no way ever posting on the internet about relationships. So you never see them on the internet. It's like they don't exist. So if you solely existed on the internet, you would think that there were no avoidant attachment men. You would think there was a bunch of preoccupied attachment women, though, complaining about these poor dudes that don't really seem to exist because they're not, in fact, on the threads defending themselves because they don't go on the internet to discuss relationships because they're avoidant attachment. Similarly, avoidant attachment women don't go on the internet to talk about relationship problems. So basically, as I've discussed many times in my comments, there's some securely attached people who are trying to make their relationship better and who are interested in psychology, etc. But mainly, there's people who struggle with preoccupied or fearful avoidant, the disorganized attachment style, not the avoidant attachment people. Those people they're not interested in talking about emotions and relationships. That's literally the definition of who and what they are. So anyway, when these younger preoccupied attachment women come into therapy, they say things like, he doesn't pay attention to me. He never wants to hang out. He doesn't spend any time with me. All he wants to do is play video games. All he wants to do is go out with his friends. It's either work or his friends, or it's work, the friends, and the kids, but never me. He never asks anything about me. If I died, he probably would go to work the next day. He would just replace me with somebody else. I have a whole podcast about avoidant husbands, and you could listen to that in depth for what these women say and what these men act like. And of course, these are preoccupied attachment women who are making the situation worse for themselves by acting needy and clingy and possessive and jealous, which they're doing because they feel attachment panic. And you can go back to my attachment styles podcast to learn more about all the attachment types in depth, which you probably should do to make this easier to understand. Anyway, so the point is, these young preoccupied attachment women, they still have all their estrogen. They really want to bond. They want to be close. They want to cuddle. They want to talk. They want to do all these romantic things. They wish their life was like more of a romantic comedy, and they just want to be close. They just always wanted to be close in marriage, and now they're with this guy that would rather, look at his phone than hang out, and they're very sad. These women, if the guy learns to be more emotionally close, they have more sex with him. I mean, that's the God's honest truth, I mean, they want to be having sex anyway. They still have a sex drive. They're on the younger side, as I've said. They are sex positive. They love sex, but it makes them feel very vulnerable. They maybe don't love it all the time. They are, after all, young mothers, so therefore exhausted. And their sex drive could be depleted by myriad things, by the way, just like everybody. Monogamy itself, then nursing, being pregnant, antidepressants, birth control, myriad things, right? as I discuss all the time. So, of course, these women still do have responsive desire versus spontaneous generally, but they do have some desire. They do want to be close. When they think about a romantic evening, it does end up in bed, but just it ends up in bed after a lot of romance, and a lot of going out, on date night and compliments and closeness and hand-holding and cuddling. They want the classic romantic stuff. And I help guys figure out what this is. I have podcasts on how to be more romantic. For these women, when they're in couples counseling, if the guy learns to express feelings, if he learns what attachment style is, if he learns not to be so dismissive and condescending, if he learns what I call the Mr. Perfect and his crazy wife dynamic is and how he, contributes to that, and you could go back to that specific podcast, Mr. Perfect and his crazy wife. I also have a post on that. Then she does want more sex, truly. And the sex life wasn't bad. And what's an interesting thing is that preoccupied attachment women will give more sexual feedback because they actually want the sex life to be good, because they consider it a barometer of the overall, connection. So these are the women who are giving feedback, like not like this, or let's try this, or that doesn't work, or ow, stop, no, whatever. Not in the ow, stop, no, like let's not ever touch again, but like teaching the guy how to be better in bed. These are the women who care enough about the relationship and the sexual quality. Sometimes they care too much about it, that they do want the sex to be better, so they do give feedback. Now, who does this whole approach of waiting? We all learn about our emotions, we learn how to validate each other, and then the sex gets better. Who does this not work for? It doesn't work for older women and more avoidant women. So most of the time, women who are post 40, have older kids, and are more avoidantly attached, this shit is not going to work. They don't want to be close to begin with, so why would it work? The guy is the one who wants both the romance and the sex. So it's not like he could give her more romance. The only thing that she ever says she wants is for him to do more shit around the house. And because these avoidant women are usually overfunctioners, frequently overfunctioners, it's like he underfunctions. So they got into that dynamic. She does do a lot of shit around the house. She does act like the CEO of the house. He's always done less than her. So yeah, he could learn to do more stuff around the house. And if he does, by the way, it's not like the sex improves either. So she doesn't want romance, so he can't do that. She wants more chores. He can do that. But these are the women for whom chore play doesn't work. And I have a whole podcast called Chore Play Does Work. Chore play is what the manosphere calls like doing chores, hoping to get laid. That does work, but it's for the preoccupied attachment women, the younger women, or the securely attached women. It's not for the avoidant attachment women. So there's a lot of guys who are preoccupied attachment guys that are with avoidant wives that nothing has seemed to work in couples counseling. And that's when they end up in my office, because they've spent years and years and they just don't know what to do. They're spinning their wheels, time and money in couples counseling, and the woman does not grow closer in any regard. And they're still in basically a sexless marriage, obviously, is less than 10 times a week, as I say, less than 10 times a week. That's funny. Less than 10 times a year, as I have told you before. That's the research definition. So anyway, what do you do then that works better with more avoidant women? Well, you have to address the sex life directly. These women don't give sexual feedback because they don't really care. They don't care about the closeness as much. And again, I have a whole podcast on avoidant wives, so you could figure out why and how she became this way. And I have a whole podcast on a post on preoccupied attachment husbands, and I believe a podcast on them as well, so you could see why you're like how you are. But basically, the guy is the pursuer, and the woman is pushing away in every regard. She doesn't give sexual feedback because she doesn't care that much. The whole intimacy of telling a man how to touch her body is overwhelming, feels fake, feels awkward. These are the women who think the man should be a mind reader in bed. These women, no women, by the way, or no men know about responsive desire. There's like 4 people. No, I'm just kidding. But maybe 1% of people know about responsive desire. So, and I talk about that repeatedly with how stupid the bait and switch idea is, because women are shocked when their desire goes down too. They assume it has to do with the man. They don't know about monogamy, the effect of monogamy evolutionarily and biologically on their drive. So anyway, the avoidant attachment women, we have to talk about sex directly in the session, because the guy could be doing all manner of shit that she hates, but she's never told him. She won't tell him if he's a bad kisser. She won't tell him if she's been faking her orgasm. She won't even tell him if he smells bad. Why? Because she's avoidant. She hates confrontation. She hates anything emotional. She hates any intimacy. And she's coupled with a preoccupied attachment guy who's super rejection sensitive. So if in bed she does say, how about like this, he usually loses his erection and sulks for 3 weeks. So, it's not fully her fault, as nothing is. It's all a dynamic. So one major reason to discuss sex directly with avoidant attachment women is because it's a safe space where I could coach her to give specific sexual feedback and him to receive it in a way that doesn't turn her off ever giving it again by being overly sensitive and reactive. Whereas, again, preoccupied attachment women and those who are younger with higher sex drives, they care more about the sex life, so they will have given such feedback before at much higher rates than avoidant attachment women will. And the next reason is because avoidant women, much like avoidant men, like to have specific goals and assignments. Honestly, they will often have sex once a week when I tell them to, just so that they could avoid fucking talking about it all the time, which is so uncomfortable and upsetting to them. Also, then they're like being a good therapy student. And many of these women are very high achieving. They're people pleasing. And the way in which people pleasing honestly works is when people try to do a good job in therapy. Because even if they start to try just to do a good job in therapy, they end up with their momentum and then things feed on themselves. They start to enjoy having sex more, feeling closer, etc. But it's like a little kid learning to read in kindergarten. They could first learn how to read because they love the teacher and they love when the teacher acts happy. And then eventually they learn to read and they like reading by themselves. It's like any positive reinforcement. It could start out extrinsic and end up intrinsic. Next, by the way, is that these people have to talk about sex directly is because the man never gets to do this. So then he tries to do it on his own. And when anybody tries to DIY something that hasn't worked for years already, it's not going to work this next time either. So a preoccupied attachment man talking about sex, he's got to be coached how to do it in real time, how to actually discuss sex in a way that isn't so aversive and overwhelming. Like, do you not even love me? Like, why don't you like to touch me? Oh my God, I like to touch you. Just tell me anything that you like. Oh, please, 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 until she wants to die, So these guys have to be taught how to talk about sex in more of a matter-of-fact way where, she could actually engage. Because remember, she's not going to engage at a super high intense level. She's not going to engage with him crying. She's not going to engage with him sulking. He has to be coached to talk about sex in a different way. People don't talk about sex at all, pretty much in our culture. So specifically, men who are very emotionally intense tend to bungle these conversations because there's so much feelings involved, there's so much hurt, and they're more rejection sensitive in general. So it ends up being kind of terrible. So for all those reasons, we need to talk about sex directly in couples counseling, specifically with women who are avoidant. Now, of course, preoccupied attachment women and their avoidant attachment husbands could benefit from talking more openly about sex as well. So then why don't therapists do it? Well, when you only have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? I mean, like, if you're not, most therapists are not interested in talking about sex in session. They don't want to. They haven't been trained in it. They haven't done their own research, their own, autodidact. What is it? Being an autodidact? That's what I am. Where you teach yourself and you research and everything. But because, unless you go to a specific program that is added on after you've been a licensed therapist, such as getting an ASEC certification or something, that's the American Academy of Sexual something, which people who've been qualified as that literally tell me don't do that. It was a lot of effort and a lot of time, and you could just read the stuff yourself. But I'm sure that a lot of people like it. It's just that was funny. Two people told me that. Anecdotally, but anecdotally is nothing. So ASEC certification is great. I just don't want to offend anybody. The point here is, unless you have either training or interest, ideally both, in sexuality, you're not going to want to talk about it. And the majority of therapists don't. They like to talk about feelings. That's why they became a therapist. So if you like to talk about feelings, then it makes sense that everything would start and end with feelings. And since you don't really know what to or talk about in the sexual domain, and you don't want to talk about it because it makes you feel uncomfortable, then you're never going to talk about it. So therefore, if you have an avoidant attachment wife, you should definitely be talking to somebody who at the very least says that they're sex positive on their website, which means that you could bring sex up, and generally has some further education, interest, training, anything about sex. I mean, I only hire people at my practice at Best Life who at least are sex positive, and I specifically ask in the interview, are you comfortable talking about sex in session? And if not, then we don't hire them, but that is not the case, and everybody doesn't want that. As I just talked about, there's plenty of preoccupied attachment young women who just want more cuddling and more closeness and less dismissiveness and less him acting like a dickwad and more of him doing chores and helping and us being a team and going to the fucking pumpkin festival together with our baby. And then they do have sex during the fucking baby's nap time and they're thrilled to do it. But if you're at this situation where you've always been pursuing her for sex, you have no idea what she likes or doesn't like in bed, she'll never talk to you about the relationship, and couples counseling, you've been spinning your wheels for months, if not years, well, then you obviously need to transition into something else where sex is discussed more directly for the reasons that I've just delineated. I mean, it's kind of frustrating. I'm frustrated on the behalf of so many people that come in and say that they were in couples counseling for years. And then I ask how much they're having sex, which was literally the guy's main problem. And it's like, oh, we don't really even have sex. Like once a month, twice a month. I mean, this is where you got to after years, And the interesting part is that many of these women will say that they've made a lot of progress in therapy. Sure. He knows how to talk in a way that she likes better. He's a better father. He's more involved with the kids. He can understand a feeling if it hits him in the face. Great, wonderful. I'm glad. But, that's not where shit begins and ends. Both people's needs need to be addressed. So this is why you need to be directly talking about your sex life. So, for example, I work with people. They didn't tell their husband that they didn't like his foreplay style for 15 years. Because they're more avoidant people. They have no language to say it. Nobody's prompting them. Anytime they started a conversation, he looked like he was going to jump out the window because he's so rejection sensitive, being preoccupied attachment. I mean, it just went to garbage. And so that's what they could have been doing in the second session or like at least the second month. Meanwhile, it's been like, oh yeah, we saw like three couples therapists off and on over the course of the past 12 years. 12 fucking years. You could have like 5 rental properties with that money, man, Then you could divorce each other more readily because you would have more income. Listen, I don't want anybody to get divorced, right? But I'm just saying, or like people could get sooner to like literally somebody figuring out that they don't want sex and will never want sex. Well, you don't need 2 years of couples counseling if you discuss sex directly from the beginning. Because many women were like, well, shit, we're doing it once a month. Isn't that good? Because it's literally never been discussed in the session besides this nebulous construct that as they get closer, then probably, definitely, why not, the sex life will improve. And it doesn't. It never, ever does. Not least of which is because nobody has ever talked about desire. Nobody's ever given any education, even about responsive desire, that the woman actually has to get herself in the mood and try to have sex to enjoy sex. I mean, even just that. Never mind the sexual feedback. Never mind the assignments being better for avoidant people. Never mind any of it. Literally, they still don't know what responsive desire is, nor have they ever put themselves into a situation where they could try to have sex and see if it gets them in the mood to have sex, which is the only way that monogamous women enjoy sex. So, I mean, like, it's really unconscionable, So before I, get even more upset about this topic, take it for what it's worth. If this is your situation, it will definitely resonate with you. Try to find a sex positive, at the very least, a sex positive therapist. Better would be somebody who is either certified in sex stuff or that you see on their profile at least that they work with sexual issues, I mean, that they're experienced with it, that they're trained in it, that they care about it, that they think that it's important for a marriage. You wouldn't, if you were Catholic and you were like super Catholic, you would not go to, a therapist who said that Catholics were stupid, right? So I know that nobody comes out there and their profile says that sex is stupid, but if sex is nowhere nowhere there for like what they work on with couples, if it's all feelings all the time and there's nothing about sex, you could infer that they do not prioritize it in their work with you. And of course, you could always reach out to me directly and for any of my people at Best Life. I even have a sex coach. She's not a therapist, but she works specifically and concretely on sexual issues. Heather Ray, the sexologist on my Best Life Behavioral Health website, and she could augment your I feel statements with your counselor if you love them so much and they're doing so much to help you. Oh, another thing, this is like totally beyond the scope of this, but if you've never talked about either of your childhoods or your sex life in couples counseling, you got to do a deep dive on what the fuck you're doing. You really do. There's only so many I feel statements that somebody can say. And I feel statements are great for people who were raised to communicate like lunatics, like all of us that grew up with parents that shout at each other like banshees all the time. It's really an eye-opener to know that people don't have to do that. But if that's where your couples counseling begins and ends, then you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing your wallet quite a disservice, by the way, too. And it's really hard to find time to schedule. If you got all that time and money back, you would be happy. So anyway, this isn't the one to share with your wife because it's just not. It's just not. Like, don't send it with your wife and then she's going to be like, no, I really think that Marcia has helped us a lot over the past 3 years. Okay, cool. That's awesome. No offense, Marcia, who of course is a hypothetical name of nobody that I know. But it sounded like a good therapist name. I'm sure Marcia helped you a lot. But if you're still having no intimacy in your marriage and this bothers one of you, then perhaps Marcia could be augmented with something else. You could stay with Marcia, stay with Marcia. Stay. Marcia is great. but if you have never discussed your genitals in session, then maybe that something else, can add to the benefit of Marcia. All right, I'll talk to everybody soon. I hope you found this funny and or informative. One or the other is great, and have a great day, guys.